Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I would like to start off by welcoming our panelists. Let's all give them a warm Phi Theta Kappa welcome. Thank you for being here. Our regional officer team decided to do a regional honors and action project so that we could help chapters learn how to do their own honors and action research project. And the reason why we chose to collaborate with Alabama Possible is because we saw a need. We realized that the poverty rate in Alabama was extremely high. And so we wanted to put together a research team, and we have our research team here on the front row. What we did was put together research. We uploaded it to a Facebook page, and then we took questions from that research. And our panelists are here today to help us answer some of those questions. And we have Kristina Scott, who is the Executive Director of Alabama Possible, and that is our collaborative partner on our project. So I'm going to hand her the mic.
Good evening. It's so nice to see y'all, and it's great to see so many familiar faces here tonight. As Carly said, I'm Kristina Scott. I'm the Executive Director of the Alabama Poverty Project and Alabama Possible. Alabama is the third poorest state in the country. Nearly 19% of Alabamians and over 27% of our children live below the federal poverty line, which is $22,000 a year for a family of four. A much more common family configuration is a mom and 2 or 3 kids, and for a family of 3, it's $17,500. So we know that a lot more of our neighbors do not have the resources they need to make ends meet and to support a healthy lifestyle. And I also want to say that some of you may have heard news reports yesterday about the poverty rate going down. We actually spent yesterday digging into census data, and it turns out that that data was very premature. So we'll have some new information about what poverty looks like right now next week when the American Community Survey comes out. So I hope that it goes down, but it was based on too small of a sample to be statistically significant. So we geeked out yesterday. And I want to thank our amazing panelists for coming down here and giving us some of their Friday night. Lindsay Martin is a social worker at UAB in community psychiatry, and is a graduate of Birmingham Southern College and works closely with One Roof, which coordinates services for the homeless population in the Birmingham, Central Alabama region. Dr. Jim Day is a professor of history at the University of Montevallo, just a few miles from here. He went to the military academy and spent 16 years on active duty in the Army before he retired and went back to graduate school. And his area of expertise is Southern history, military history, and he was a student of Dr. Wayne Flint, who founded the Alabama Poverty Project. It is a real understanding of the systems that have perpetuated poverty here. And Larry Lee, well, he's one of my favorite people in Alabama. He is originally from Wetumpka, is that right? What, no? Montgomery? Okay. So he's originally from Montgomery. He most recently was executive director of the Center for Rural Alabama. He's got a background doing economic development, and he's one of my favorite people in Alabama. He's real smart, and he now writes op-eds that are published in the Birmingham News, the Washington Post, all over the country, writing about how we can have high-performing, high-poverty schools. And I know he's going to talk a lot about that this evening, and he's especially passionate about an elementary school, George C. Hall in Mobile. Do we have people from Mobile here tonight? Yes, so Mobile's doing some great work on changing educational outcomes for low-income kids. So with that, let's start the questions from the research team. So Jeff, will you get this rolling?
Hi, I'm Jeff Patterson from Jefferson State Community College, and in his 2008 article, Poverty Rates in Alabama, David Boston asserts that the most significant contributing factors to poverty in Alabama are economic isolation and poor urban planning. Do you agree with this? Why or why not?
And Jim, I thought you could start the conversation on this one, and then I know that your fellow panelists will have something to say.
To a certain extent. Yes, certainly there is economic isolation, there is poor urban planning, but I think the factors that contribute to poverty are deeper than that, broader than that. Those are some of the descriptive factors I think that we can address. Kristina asked me to kind of take a historian's view of poverty in Alabama, and I think that applies. I think in many ways we kind of accept poverty as a way of life, or just the state of affairs in our state. And frankly, doing some reading in Wayne Flint's works, he talks about the idea that Alabama really came to be as part of the Jacksonian egalitarian movement, which sounds really good because you think about, okay, this is democracy. This is the democratic process moving from Jeffersonian republicanism to Jacksonian democracy in the early to mid-19th century. The way that plays out, though, I think in the residents of Alabama, it becomes more individualistic. The idea that nobody's going to tell me what to do, I can make up my own mind, and then we bow our necks and we say, and some people call that stubbornness. So it depends on how you take that egalitarianism and play it out. With that comes a certain resistance, I think, to new ideas or new ways of thinking. The idea of resisting anybody from outside, whatever the inner circle is there, whether it be a community, a neighborhood, the state, the southern region, any of that. I think we are resistant to that because we think, oh, somebody's high and mighty coming in here again trying to tell us what to do, and we're doing just fine on our own. In the long-range view, I think we are still paying the price for the institution of slavery. And certainly in that case, you had slaves who had nothing, but you had a lot of poor whites too who didn't have much either. And within that situation, you have, I think, an inherent sense of deference from those who don't have means, relying on those who did have the means. And within that society, you have power brokers, essentially, those who are the political elites, social elites, economic elites, and other folks were reliant on that. And I think that that's kind of an inherent approach that we as Alabamians take. We're relying on somebody else, somebody who's a little bit smarter, somebody who's has a little bit more money, somebody who has a little bit more influence to do it for us. And so that we defer there and don't take responsibility for ourselves and take action on our own behalf. And I think that really is at the core of poverty. It has to do with expectations. And I think we have poor expectations of ourselves. It's almost like we approach life hat in hand, saying, okay, situation's bad, we'll just muck through, we'll do the best we can with the cards that we've been dealt, instead of taking the approach to say, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, now what's the path for getting there? Someone has said, I saw a quotation recently, said, education is pegged to the limited reality of a child's life, not to his or her dreams or aspirations. I'll say that again. Education is pegged to the limited reality of a child's life, not to his or her dreams or aspirations. And I think that's that idea of, well, we'll just get through with what we have, as opposed to setting the goal, setting the standard, and then having a path to do that. One other thing that I think contributes to poverty, and in some ways this is kind of counterintuitive, but one of the things that Alabamians resist significantly is taxes. In fact, in Alabama, tax is a 4-letter word. But you get what you pay for. And when we talk about funding education, in fact, we have a vote next Tuesday to talk about, shifting some funds around so that we can make the general fund solvent. If you look at the overall budget for the state of Alabama, you say, well, gee whiz, the preponderance of that goes to education. So Alabamians must value education. And yet, we're not funding education any better than we are the general fund. We're reliant on income and sales taxes. Sales taxes fluctuate with the business cycle. It's also a regressive tax, which puts a greater burden on the poor as opposed to the more affluent. Income taxes are earmarked for the most part to take care of salaries for K through 12 teachers and other education expenses. Property tax is the lowest in the nation. You could double it, we'd still be the lowest in the nation. You could triple it, we'd come in at about 47th or 48th. So we get what we pay for. In my view, the size of the pie is not big enough. You can do the proportions there, but we don't put our money where our mouth is. We say we value education, that we're concerned about children and their learning K through PhD and wherever the goals fall there, and yet we have insufficient funding, not just for our general budget and our general fund, but we don't adequately fund education either. So with that, I think our expectations are very low. We're not willing to make the sacrificial steps to fund where we want to be. We just muck along with where we are. And editorial that Wayne Flint wrote about a month or so ago for the Birmingham News, in that he said, fellow citizens, rejoice about your low taxes, but worry about the future of your children. So we need to figure out what we want to achieve in education, and then figure out how to fund it, pay for it, and then I think have expectations of excellence, not just the status quo.
I could probably spend the rest of the evening talking about some of the things as to, basically the question, Humphreys, is why are we content with being poor? And I would contend that it's almost a part of our DNA. My great-great-grandfather moved from central Georgia to Covington County down in South Alabama in the 1820s. And his daddy used to say he was poor when he got there, and he stayed that way. My grandfather, Daddy's daddy, was a sharecropper in Covington County. And I was the first child in my family to ever go to college. But we've never, and there's a number of answers to this question. One of the most fascinating little books I've ever read is something, and Jim may have read it, called The Cracker Culture. It's written, it's not a very big book, written by a Texas professor. But basically what he talks about is that the South that we know, was settled by people who were Celtic in origin. They were not industrialists. They did not, the same kind of people that settled New England did not settle the South. Our ancestors, to a large degree, were nomads. They were herders. They had herds of hogs and herds of cows and herds of sheep. And if you look at the pen and ink drawings in this book, as I have, you'll look at them and say, my God, I know him. You know, I saw him at the football game at Red Level the other night. But these were people, as Jim said, they just like to be independent. They don't want people, so it's, and I told Wayne Flint one day, I said, Wayne, it's in our DNA, and he said there's an awful lot of truth in that. But now you look at the history of this state, and I think two of the most important dates in the history of the state of Alabama was 1793, before we ever became a state, and that was when Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. And in 1814, when Andrew Jackson defeated the Creek Indians at Horseshoe Bend. Because when Whitney invented the cotton gin, that opened up lots of land for people to say, now we can gin this cotton we can raise. And go back in the early 1800s, and in about a 10-year period, the population of Alabama went up like 1,000%. It was something they referred to it as Alabama fever. People coming from other parts of the South, to a large degree, coming to Alabama to get land to raise cotton. And then when Andrew Jackson beat the Creek Indians, and that really opened it up. And we have never tried in this state, we've never understood the importance of an education. And I mean, Grandpa went to maybe the 3rd grade. I asked my mother 6 months ago, I said, why did I go to college? She said, we just thought it was a thing to do. But think of yourselves, think of your family, and think of this. We do not, across Alabama, we do not have what I call an education foundation.